To do something new today. We're going to read a Reddit post directly from somebody who just failed the exam, kind of feeling the blues of the exam. We're actually going to share a little story of somebody that was in our cohort that went through something similar and how we got them back on track. And then we're actually going to take you through a couple of steps of if you are in that situation, we're going to take you through 5 steps of how to get yourself back on track and how to get yourself over the hump. And then we're going to kind of end this whole thing. And what's up, everybody? Welcome to CFP Talks. My name is Jonas, and with me, as always, is Mr. Raman Singh. Raman, what's going
Joe,
on, man?
how's it going?
It's going good. No
Yeah,
complaints. Friday afternoon.
yeah.
It's getting hot.
It is getting hot. How hot does it get out in LA during summer?
We pop out a couple of really hot days, but usually it's 75 to 8. Like it'll be 75 to 80 this weekend, and that's pretty average. And that's exactly where I like it. That's
Yeah.
nice. No,
Those
no
are
air
rookie numbers,
condition.
man. Get to 110. Get to 110,
Mm,
then we're talking some
That's
serious heat.
that's not that life is not for me. I'm not cut out for that life.
Oh man. Well, so Joe, I'd love to hear what's on the agenda today.
Yeah, so today we got a great episode. One of my favorites that we do in the scope of our recordings here. Today we're going to talk a little bit about what do you do if you failed the CFP exam.
Mm.
So we're actually going to do something new today. We're going to read a Reddit post directly from somebody who just failed the exam, kind of feeling the blues of the exam. We're actually going to share a little story of somebody that was in our cohort that went through something similar and how we got them back on track. And then we're actually going to take you through a couple of steps of if you are in that situation, we're going to take you through 5 steps of how to get yourself back on track and how to get yourself over the hump. And then we're going to kind of end this whole thing and wrap it up with a few little tips, little nuggets that Rhea and Ramen have for you. And we're going to close it out at the end of the day here. So that is what we are doing today, Mr. Ramen.
Wow. So, well, you know what? Let's get started then.
Let's do it. All right. So we have a Reddit post that you have pulled out. You want to
Yeah,
give me a quick
yeah.
read?
Yeah, so I spend a lot of time on looking at these Reddit posts and try to help out the community the any way I can. So I saw this post and the post basically said I failed the test today. I don't think I would. I use Dalton. I have little industry experience. Changed my careers. I studied a lot of hard concepts and formulas, and none of that was on the exam. I needed to understand more of the little basics, but you would need different products and different clients. And he's like, I did worse on this test than any other test I've taken so far on this practice CFP exams. So you could tell this person is, this person put in the effort, put in the time, right? And he obviously was expecting one thing on the exam, but something else came out right out of it. So Joe, how let me ask you, so when we run into a student, when you run into a student like this, like how do you deal with that? And how do you get them to reset? And I would love to hear that story that you said you wanted to share as well.
Yeah, I mean, looking at this, I feel for the student because, at the end of the post they write, biggest bummer is not being able to put it behind me. I felt like I filled my head with so much stuff. Some I forgot, started to get confused with other stuff, and while I didn't know what happened. Yesterday I met with someone who teaches a review course, and he said that Dalton tends to give you too much information. I am just, hang on, venting, but I also look forward to any feedback. I think this is kind of like one of the hardest things to it's such a gut punch, right? To get to put in the time, to put in the effort, to do what you think is the right thing to do and then not get across the other side.
Yeah.
And especially because if you're going to go to any CFP provider, right on page one, they're going to plaster their rates, their pass rates. And for all intents and purposes, everybody has a very, very high pass rate. And to feel like you're one of the few people that didn't pass after putting all the time and effort, it stinks.
Hmm.
And we ran into this with somebody in our cohort um, who didn't pass, not necessarily from a lack of effort. All right, let's call this person John, right?
Sure.
They were in our class. They came to class. They clearly studied, they were clearly putting in the time. But regardless of what was going on in class, what was happening outside of class a was rushed, it was manic, it was anxious, and similar to what this student is saying is, you know, I'm going in here and I kind of did all the hard stuff and I focused so hard and then all this fundamental stuff came up
Hmm.
and I felt like I got blindsided. That hurts.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
hurts.
Especially when you put all the effort in, right? You're
Right.
putting in all the effort.
Right. And I think that is kind of the biggest misconception of this exam is that if I put in X amount of hours, I'm going to get the result. And that's not true,
Mm-mm.
right? There's a lot of people who put in 150, 200 hours, 250, 300 hours who don't come out with the result.
Yeah.
So, is effort, can you pass this exam without effort? No. Will effort guarantee a pass? No. So you have to understand that, just putting in time alone isn't going to get you over the hump. And I think that's what stinks because it feels like you wasted a lot of time. But, similar to our student who we kind of sat down with and was like, hey, we got to recalibrate here and help you and figure out what's going on because it clearly wasn't from a lack of effort. So maybe we have to change the way you are studying
Right.
and change that methodology as opposed to just continuing to drive in hours.
Right. It's funny you say that. I tried to pick up golf a few years back. Everybody wants to play golf, especially in our industry, right? And I remember I would go to the driving range and I'll just, get either a 3 wood or a driver and just try to like swing as hard as I can. And I would, buy like 50, a bucket of 50 balls and just keep swinging at it, putting in the time and putting in the effort. And I just couldn't. I mean, I could, dude, I would use a driver and I'll barely pass like, like 150 feet or something like that. It was embarrassing, right? And then I'm like, man, this sucks because I'm like there, I'm putting in the effort, until I had a friend come up with me and he goes, hey, man, like, you're you're doing this with your shoulder or you're looking away. Like he started correcting those minute details for me, Joe. And when I started like fixing those little details and I had a better process in place, now the amount of hours that I was or the time that I was putting in into those golf swing, it actually drastically improved my swing.
Mm,
Studying for the CFP or studying for, a matter of fact, any material, studying in general, I feel like it's no different than, learning a new skill. You could put the time in and effort in, but that's not going to be enough until you do it the right way, basically.
correct. And I think there's two ways at it. There is the common way, which is if I put in, you could put in a lot of hours, but you're going to waste a lot of time on trial and error because eventually you're going to get to the point like you did with your golf swing, which is like, how many times can I buy a bucket of 100 balls, swing at this, and watch the ball go between 130 and 150 feet? Because initially you're just learning, right? So, okay, cool. But if there isn't that improvement, it's not motivating to continue to come back and do it,
Right,
right? So you can continue hacking at it and then go, wait a second. I literally just sat there and watched somebody who was like hitting everything 250 to 300.
right.
And now I'm watching that. I'm going, wow, look how square their shoulders are. Maybe I should do that.
Yeah.
And then so there's a lot of trial and error, but you're undoing a bad habit. And so you're burning even more time.
And we've had students like that, right? Where we have to like help them undo the bad habits of their
That's
study.
right. That's right. And there a lot of students, and if you're one of those people whose default is, I'm gonna go at it for 8 hours at a time, and I'm gonna just grind my way to this. And we're saying, whoa, 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 slow down. There's a better way to do this, right? And that this is our student exactly. And the way that we got him to really pass the exam was two things. And you remember we pulled him over at the end of class and
Yeah.
we're like, dude, cut it out. Stop trying to just Q bank your way through this exam.
Right.
It's not working. And the thing that we said to him is spend more time in your flashcards. You are
Yes.
making so many simple errors. And we said to him, and do you remember we were like, you now have a time block that you are not allowed to go over on flashcards.
Right.
And he's like, well, wait, you're telling me to do fun? Yes, because when you're sitting down and studying, we need your intensity to go up, and I need you to be laser focused and locked in that time. And when you're done, you're done. Because you can do it by a results by volume approach, right? There's a lot of people when I got into the industry, 100 cold calls a day,
Right.
right? You do 100 calls a day, you get 3 meetings a day, you get one client out of those 3 meetings. And I'm like, holy crap, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. I do not want, I remember, and they would track our calls. Like, so,
Right.
I'd be sit there and dialing and dialing. I would get answering machine after answering machine. I finally said, screw it. And, I would try anything other than cold calling. I hated it so much, but I did it. I hated it, but I was like, I feel like I'm just dialing like a robot.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what if there's a better way to do this? Like refine a pitch or do that and work on this and figure. But like any, like you said, any skill, like you turn into a robot after a while. And when you're answering questions, you start turning in, it starts to become robotic and you're no longer answering the questions. You're not reading it with any kind of intensity. You just become a drone.
Right. And when you end up getting the actual exam given to you and you see these things written differently, you freeze because you weren't ready for that. You weren't really ready. You didn't really master the art of breaking down the questions or understanding the material. You just had the master of art of answering Dalton questions or Danko questions so well. Right?
Correct.
I mean, they're giving you good material. I would say, I mean, I have nothing against their material. I just feel like there could be proper guidance, and if you don't have the proper guidance, especially for the ones who are going to retake the test, right? Then you go back into doing the same old habits again, and then boom, next thing you know, you fail again.
That's right. That's right. So I think like if you're sitting here and you're going and you're listening to this episode and saying, all right, Joe, all right, Raman, great. Now what? What do I
Mhm.
do now? Okay, we're going to give you 5 steps right now. All right. Step number one is sit down and write down what on the exam got you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And that could be a topic, or that
Mhm.
could be the length of the question. It could be the wording. Write down the things right now when it's most fresh in your brain as to what really got me. Was it your timing? Was it you felt like the case study got you? Did you feel like it was the retirement questions? Maybe I didn't really understand how tax and investment connected.
Yeah.
Because if I saw an investment question, I could answer it. If I saw a tax question, I could answer it, but I couldn't do it together.
Right.
Maybe it was suitability. Maybe it was I didn't really understand how to do self-employment tax. It could be as detailed or as general as you want it to be, but you have to write down a minimum of 10 items that you feel that were really hard for you or that made the exam very difficult. I think that's
Yeah.
step one.
Yep.
What am I missing there?
Oh no, I think you covered it all. I mean, the sooner you do that, the better it is because it's fresh in your mind. You know, don't don't tell yourself or tell your instructor or anybody be like, "Oh, I did poorly at retirement." It's not just retirement. Like what in retirement was confusing to you? What in estate planning when confusing? And I mean, you're gonna be like Ramen. You say this so many times. Don't mess up on general principles. Like you have to pass your general principles. If you messed up on general principles, you know how I am. I'm really big into that, man. You gotta
Yeah,
know your GPP, you know.
you got to know
Um,
general principles.
yeah. You know, don't be broad about your module. Like, oh, I failed this module. It's kind of like what inside that module, that did not make sense to you, that was troublesome to you. But
Good.
that's step one. Yep.
Okay. And
What's
then
step two?
take a week off.
Yeah. Give it a little reset, right?
Yep. And I think you got to let the emotions settle because especially a day, two, three after the exam, you're raw. Hurts,
Yeah.
stinks.
You're
Feel
you're
that.
studying because of emotions now, not necessarily because with the plan. It's just kind of like you're emotionally angry and you're just kind of like, I can't believe this happened. I'm gonna go at it again starting the 2 day like tomorrow.
Yep. When you failed the first time taking CFP, what was your reaction?
You know what? I was very honest to myself. I told myself that I was like, you know what? I should have been better at it. I should have tried better and I did not. And I was like, you know what? But it's okay. It's okay. And so I took the March exam and I could have started studying again and taken the July exam again. Then I was like, you know what? I want to give it a little break. I wanted to change my job. And so I didn't start studying until August for the November exam.
Hmm.
But I went in with the because thing is I gave myself that break. Now, granted, I'm not saying or we're not saying that if you fail the March exam or in this case the July exam, don't take the November exam, take the March exam for the following year. We're not saying that, but take the rest that your mind and your body needs, and then decide when you want to start studying, and that'll allow you to approach into whether you're going to set yourself up for the November exam or March 2026 exam.
Hmm. So if so now that I've taken a week off and now I can start wrapping my head around exactly what you said, which is when am I going to take this thing again? When should I do it? Is it the right time to do it? But more importantly, I think it's time to audit your old study plan.
Yes, 100%.
Where do you start with that?
You know, so when people say like, "Well, I audited my study plan," I just looked at my Dalton, my Danko material, and and I just started doing it again. It's kind of like, all right, well, you literally did the same thing last time around,
Hmm.
right? Don't do the same thing again and follow the same structure. Although if you want to follow the same structure, that's fine, but figure out when go back into your old notes, go back into the books if you have the physical textbooks and see how you took your notes. How did you take your notes around your material, right? Were you just answering questions aggressively and you have very little notes? Did you spend time on flashcards or were you watching videos all the time and barely spend time actually reading the textbook? Right? These are
Or
things that you want to do
or
a mental. Mhm.
or did you have a study plan at all?
Or did you have a study plan at all?
Right. So I
Absolutely.
think I think a lot of us are coming back and going, I'm auditing my study plan, but if your study plan was a little bit of this and a little bit of that, how do you know if you're progressing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And how would you know if all you're doing is answering aggressively practice questions?
Correct. Like if your study plan didn't have some sort of structure, then that's the first place to start in your audit is what is my structure? Because if it doesn't have a structure, remember, learning has to occur in a structured environment, right? That's the
Absolutely.
way we learn, right? Like if you think back to, when you learned math, our teachers would sit there with blocks, but there was a process of where they move kids through. And, I have the benefit of, having somebody in my household who works in education, who is working with kids and developing curriculum at the elementary level math.
Mm,
And so the things is that these kids have to hit benchmarks. They have to be able to do certain things in certain structured environments. And then you have the autonomy to problem solve and analyze and do all
yeah.
those, cool things. But in order for you to learn, and the best way to learn, and I think that, you know, when it comes to work or when it comes to other things in our lives, sometimes we don't realize the role of luck in that, right? There's chaos that ends up happening, but you end up getting through to the other side. And you're sitting there going, wow, I could do anything, right? And I can, but when it comes to learning from an academic standpoint, I think structure is really, really important. It cuts down on the stress. You know what you're always doing when you go in and sit down and think about that comfort that came with going to school every day. You may not have necessarily liked it, but you knew what to expect.
Yeah.
And you knew that at first, at 8 o'clock, I'm in this classroom, and at 8:40, I'm in this classroom. And there was a structure that allowed things to run, but also gave you comfort. less anxiety, didn't make the process so crazy. And if the process was crazy for you, that's probably a good place to start is get some structure.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I've worked with several students as they kind of approach taking the exam, and they come up to me and they'll say, "Well, I'm taking practice tests. I kind of read through the material. I don't know what to do." If you're saying I'm reading the material and I'm taking practice questions and it still doesn't feel enough, and you're telling yourself like I don't know what else to do, it's because, like you said, you're lacking a structure in your study plan. So when you audit your study plan, ask yourself that did I have a definitive or defined structure to for the study plan that I could do day in and day out, and not just kind of fall under into the just take practice tests every single day and watch videos.
That's right. And
I-
it's
I'll be
measurable.
I'll be very upfront with anybody who's listening and watching this. If you are just taking practice tests and watching videos, there's a 90% chance you'll fail the CFP exam. So I'd say 9 out of 10 people will fail the CFP exam if all you're doing is watching videos and taking practice tests. There's more to the exam than that.
Hmm.
So if you don't have a proper structure with studying, where like to your point, I know Joe Nissom here loves flashcards, guys, and you know what? Even he's convinced me how helpful flashcards are. If before Joe was in our life, I was like, oh, flashcards, yeah, whatever. Don't read notes. But I've learned the power of flashcards and why they're important. Now, another thing in adding into flashcards is don't just have bunch of random flashcards from random providers and just look through them. Repetitiveness is the key. So if you're going to use the Nissan flashcards, if you're going to use the Danko flashcards, if you're going to use the Dalton flashcards, you need to be a perfectionist at those flashcards and know them inside and out.
Yes.
That's what's defining structure is.
Yeah. And you need something that you're repeating on a weekly basis.
Daily
Ideally,
basis.
yeah. And again, but something that you can measure the progress. So if I do my
Yes,
flashcards and I feel like, okay, and remember that they have their place. And being in a structure doesn't mean that you rely solely on one resource. You understand the limitations of those
of
resources.
course.
The book has its limitation. The videos has their limitation. The flashcards have their limitations. The practice questions have their limitations.
Yeah,
That's why the structure is there because it's combining the best of all those resources and putting you in a position to succeed. And that's why when you're auditing your study plan, the first thing is what was my structure? And if you didn't have one, that's a great place to start. And if you did have one, now you have to ask your time, how efficient was my study plan?
yeah,
Was I doing a lot because that makes me feel better, or was I being effective? And I think that's the harder one to kind of figure out. I think it's easy, and I think we all know like I was kind of all over the place. I would do some a little bit here and a little bit there and a little, and that's easy to identify. I think the harder one is, okay, I actually had some structure. How do I know if that structure is actually working?
yeah.
What do you think about that?
Man, that's tough, right? I think if you feel like you had a proper structure, and I think that kind of jumps into one of our next steps is you need to have that structure reviewed and maybe have a partner that you're working with and evaluate your structure and find flaws in it,
Mm,
right? Because if you believe that you had a proper structure, how and you failed, then there's obviously something missing in that structure,
correct.
right? And then how do you overcome that at that point? You either hire a professional to help you out, right? Or you bring somebody into the somebody who knows better, or somebody who's taken the test before or done it a few times, right? Understands this stuff and help you reevaluate that structure.
I think that the ultimate measure of your structure is you have to put things into place that actually measure your progress.
Yes, 100%. So
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 it's got
what,
to
what
be
do you mean
measurable.
by that? What do you mean by that? Like
What I mean by that is that if all you do is practice questions and those practice questions are not improving, or you're on the roller coaster, which means sometimes they're good and sometimes they're bad depending on the wording, you're not improving.
right.
Like you need to see improvement. And that doesn't mean every quiz is better than the one before it. it means that if I look over the course of 2 weeks or a month, I can see my investments have went from a 50 to a 65. That's improvement.
Yeah.
Right? Between my first quiz and my last quiz, I can see that improvement because I'm understanding the material better. It has to be measurable in some shape or form, but you can't always use that as the you can't be using the measuring stick as the actual mode of practice.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
if,
Oh,
you know what
well
I'm
said, Joe. Damn. Say that one more time. You can't use the. I want to hear that again.
You can't use the measuring stick as the mode of practice.
Yes.
I.e., I don't run a marathon every day if I'm training for a marathon.
Right.
Some days I do fast runs, some days I do slow pace runs,
Yeah.
some days I'm just doing mobility, right? I'm just working on my flexibility and keeping my joints healthy, but I'm not going out and saying, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to run a marathon.
Right.
Doesn't make sense,
Yeah.
right? And so when we think about it that way, if the only mode that you're using is practice questions, there has to be other ways to do it other than multiple choice practice questions. The other thing is, don't mistake time for intensity.
Mm.
Okay. Meaning that the intensity of your studies, your actual studying, has to be very high. And this is
Yeah.
something that took me a while to learn where, I was studying with a buddy and I was like, oh, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to study for 3 hours. And this is back when I was actually a sales assistant at Smith Morning. We were studying for the seven. And we would leave work at 5. We'd go to the gym. We'd shower at the gym, and then we would come back to the office. We'd go there at 5 o'clock. We'd be done with our workout about 6:15. Hop in the shower. We'd order something to eat on the way back to the office. So we'd have dinner there, and then we would study. And I remember like we would get in there, and then we would start bullshitting.
Yeah.
All right, like blah blah blah, 7 o'clock, and then you would look up and it would be 8:15, and you've gotten 6 problems done or 6 pages of reading
Yeah.
done or whatever you're doing. And I remember we had to like start yelling at each other, like, dude, shut the hell up. Like,
Yeah.
okay, we get it. You had a rough day. Sit down and study and shut your mouth. And I remember like once that intensity went through the roof, our it improved so much and we actually chopped down our study time
Yeah.
dramatically because the intensity was there. And you see this all the time, right? You see people at the gym, they're at the gym for an hour and a half and then you see them on the machines like, what are
Or
you doing? Or they're on their phone like, okay, good, you
or
put
or
in
they're trying to hit on another like a girl or two at
right.
the
It's like, if you go there and you do 50% of your best weight, you're not doing anything.
Right.
You're putting the time in, right? I go on the gym and I work on the treadmill. I don't understand why I haven't lost 50 pounds. Well, maybe you need to increase the intensity of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Cut down the time, but increase the intensity so your muscles are actually working. And the same thing here. Can't all be flashcards. Feels easy.
Yeah.
Until you get to that point of discomfort, the studying should feel a bit uncomfortable.
Yes.
Not
100%.
so uncomfortable that it's not motivating, but if it's not challenging you, you're not growing.
Yeah.
Just like if your muscles aren't burning, they're not going to grow.
That's a very good reference. No, I completely agree with that. You have to be uncomfortable to be comfortable.
Ooh, Ramanism right there.
Writing some haikus over here.
Some haiku.
So
Uh,
okay, so audit your study plan, and then I know I briefly kind of jumped in, said one of the next steps. So what would you say after auditing the study plan?
find a measure of accountability.
Okay, find a measure of accountability. So, and then after finding the accountability, then when do I start anticipating on like, okay, should I book this test now or should I wait? Like, okay, let's just say July cycle ended and John, we don't want to say John because John passed. Let's just say this XYZ individual failed the test, they reset and they're back into studying. When should they start thinking about like, okay, should I take the November exam or should I postpone it until 2026?
Well, I think you should make a decision.
Okay.
because I think that, a lot of people come to me 6, 8, 9 months in advance and go, okay, I want to start studying now. And I'm like, no. And they're like, yeah, but I want to give myself a lot of time. I'm like, that's too much time
Yeah.
because too little time and too much time end up in the same thing.
Yeah. Fair.
One, you end up rushing and then you end up cutting corners. And the other one, you just get bored.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
just get so bored. It's so boring. You don't want to do this. You get burned out. And then stuff starts popping up in the way and it turns into a disaster. So I think that you need to make a decision based on how far away you were from passing. If you're, if you're failing with two reds or three reds, you should probably take it the next exam cycle.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good, that's okay. That's fantastic. At least like have some sort of idea that, okay, if I have two or three reds, perhaps I am ready to take the next cycle. But if I had four or five reds,
Four or
I,
five or six, if you're two in the green, maybe you wanna take a breath where you're giving yourself 4 months to study. Make sure that you're giving yourself enough time to go back into your fundamentals and relearn the concepts. Four, you're kind of in the middle,
yeah,
right? So like you could go either way depending on how far in the red you are.
sure.
If you're right on the line with four and there were just four slightly in the red and one really bad one, and that pushed you. Again, it depends on how far away from passing you are, and I think that should be the frame of reference. If you want to go and take it the next exam cycle, cool. Just make sure that you are being realistic. And if you don't know, come and speak to one of us. We're happy to help.
Yeah, 100%. So Joe, as we're getting ready to wrap things up, what type of tips would you offer to our listeners right now? What's the tip of the week?
I would say kind of the most important thing here is audit your study plan,
Okay.
but do so when you're a little removed from the exam.
Yeah. With
Okay.
clarity, right? With
With
have a clear
clarity.
mind. Have a
Yeah.
clear mind.
You can't do it when you're angry. You can't do it when you're sad. You can't do it when you're still pissed off at the exam and it was subject. And if you're saying things like the exam was so subjective, like it could have been those two answers and they would have been completely right. Then you didn't really understand the concept or what the CFP was getting at in the
Yeah.
study material.
Yep.
So you do have to go back and relearn that. And even if you saying that's not what I would do in my practice, cool. Remember, when you get your CFP, you're allowed to do whatever you want in your practice as long as it fits inside of the CFP's ethical boundaries. But that's the whole point of this test is so you can make it your own.
Right.
It's giving you a starting point, but we all have to abide by the same starting point.
Fair. Fair. Okay.
So, number one, make sure that you're not feeling emotional and then audit the study plan.
Yep. Okay.
Once you do that, go and get yourself some accountability because this process is tough. So if that accountability is a study partner, if that accountability is a instructor, if it's a tutor, if it's a class, find yourself some accountability because this is not a process to be done alone.
Yeah.
Don't do it alone. You don't have to do it alone, and if you have the ability not to do it alone, don't do it alone. You'll learn a lot more that way. You'll learn from the people around you. You'll learn from these classes. You'll learn from instructors. Take advantage of the resources that you have available to you. Learn from other people, be around other people. Accountability comes from other people, not some notification on your phone that you can hit clear.
Right. Right. No, absolutely. And we get it. We get it. It sucks. You failed the test. Right? It's emotionally draining. You put in all the effort, you put in the time, and staying stuck is going to be optional. Changing your or keeping the same habits is optional. It's up to you to decide what you want to do next, how you want to tackle this exam next. We're giving you the roadmap. We're giving you the roadmap to reset, to refocus, right? And then be able to retake this test with more confidence.
Hmm.
And if you need help, there's help out there. You need a personalized study plan, build a personalized study plan, ask for help. We're here to help out. But Joe, what else would you like to add at the end of the day?
No, I think that's all I got for today. I think again, if you need help, we're gonna link our assessment link in the what is it called under the video?
The description, the
Yeah, thank
description.
you. The
Yeah, there you
description of
go,
the
there you
video.
go.
Yeah, there we go. Look, I'm tech savvy. But we're gonna link it in the bottom of this video. Sit down, chat with Raman and I. We are more than happy to help. And next week, we are going to actually lay out what we believe is the perfect study plan for the CFP and what that structure actually looks like, which
Yeah.
we're really excited to share with you guys. Any questions or concerns, everybody, please feel free to reach out to Raman or myself. Make sure that you like this video and subscribe to our channel so we can continue bringing you videos like this. And we will see you guys next week.